Hello, everyone. My name's Katrina McLaughlin. I'm the Artistic Director here at the Abbey, and I am absolutely thrilled to be able to speak to Enda Walsh and Cillian Murphy here today. Two of our, I suppose, most well-known and exciting theatre makers. And it's a real privilege to have them here on the Abbey stage and to talk a little bit about their collaboration of 27 years. Am I right? So just for the person out there might be one of you who doesn't know who these two are. Enda Walsh is a playwright, has been a director and an actor. He has written over 20 original plays. He's very highly awarded, has won the George Devine Award and the Stuart Parker Award for Disco Pigs. I'm reading these because there's so many of them. The Edinburgh First Awards for the New Electric Ballroom and the Walworth Farce. And for your adaptation, your stage adaptation of Once 8 Tonys, including you winning the award for Best Book. Cillian Murphy, who has worked with Enda on a number of theatre and more recently a film collaboration, has also done a little bit of TV and film. Winning a Golden Globe, a National Television Award, a BAFTA Award, an IFTA Award, and is known for films like 28 Days Later, Breakfast on Pluto, Batman The Dark Knight, the one I haven't seen, I'm afraid. The rest I've all seen. The Wind That Shakes the Barley, Peaky Blinders, we all know you from, and about to come out or soon coming out, Oppenheimer, I think we might touch on a little bit later. But before we get into your screen credits and your screen work, can we talk a bit about where you met and Disco Pigs and how that came about? Disco Pigs, I think most of us who work in theatre remember as being a really exciting moment in theatre. I think it's when Irish theatre got a bit cool. We were kind of touching on European kind of edgy theatre. Can you talk maybe, and if you talk first about where Runt and Pig came from and how it came about?
Well, hi everyone. It came about because oh God, I hope she's not here. But I was God, suddenly it was like I was. Sorry if you are, but I'm sure she's not. Anyway, she lives in Cork. But I was going out with this woman at the time, and it's all good material, isn't it? But anyway, and I was really, really in love with her, and she was a twin, and I became a sort of, I became a little sort of like, I became interested in twins, sort of twin relationships and all this stuff to carry it. Well, yeah, whatever, and. Anyway, and these sort of secret languages that twins can sort of develop and the sort of behavior and all this type of thing. And there was a book by Marjorie Wallace called The Secret Twins, I think, and which around that time. So I was reading sort of, while I was trying to score with this woman, I was reading books about sort of like, twin relationships and all this sort of carry on. And also our relationship was tanking really badly. And I ended up sort of writing about these characters in Cork who were sort of 17, celebrating their sort of 17th birthday, and called Pig and Runt, who live in their version of Cork, which is sort of, Pork City. And they developed this sort of language. They have developed this language. They meet at sort of birth. And but they're not sort of brother and sister, but they're next door neighbours. But they develop this argot and this sort of secret way, this code. And it was my one good idea in the play is that I would develop this language so even Cork people would go, "What the fuck is that?" And because when I first moved down to Cork as a Dubliner, I was going, "Do people really talk like this? Are they sort of taking the piss out of me?" But so I wrote this language that was really hard to for an audience to get, and yet it would sort of teach the audience how to learn this language, and then at the end the characters revert to English, and it's the relationship is over. These two kids, and so is the language. So that was the one idea that I had, and it was a pretty good idea actually. And then I was writing it for Eileen Walsh because Eileen Walsh, I saw her in Dante Dan, and I thought she was an amazing actress, but we didn't know who we didn't know who the guy was going to be. And that's when Pat Kiernan, who directed Disco Pigs so brilliantly, he had taught Killian in school, isn't that right, in Prez?
Yeah, I did a drama module in fourth year. I was the first transition year. We were the first year that did it, and Pat came in and did a kind of a module. I was around 17. I felt completely in love with him. I thought he was the coolest person I'd ever seen. And then, but I wasn't really interested in theatre. I was more interested in music. And then I went to college and did a bit of like dramat stuff in UCC. And then, I was in a band, and then the band broke up and fell apart. And then I kind of got a bit more interested in theatre, and I'd see Enda and Pat in pubs in Cork, and I just kind of annoyed, I pestered them. And then eventually they said I could have an audition for to play, so I auditioned for Enda.
Yeah, and I met him in the Farmgate in Cork, and we had a sort of conversation about it. And I think, no, we had to send the script. You were camping at the time in France.
I got the script sent to my tent.
You were a star.
That's
even
true.
Then.
My campsite in outside Avignon.
That is so French.
Yes. That actually happened.
And when you got that script, did what Enda was afraid of? Did you look at it and go, "What the fuck is this?" With the language?
I did honestly. I don't think I'd ever properly looked at a play except for stuff you do in school. And this was very like the language like Enda described. And I remember reading it, and it said it would have a line of dialogue, and then it would say beat, and then like, which everyone who knows theatre knows that's pause. I had no idea. I thought it was like drumming, or I had no idea, and I was so ignorant of it. But I kind of had a sense that it was good. You know.
But then he came. Wow, amazing praise there. This is going to be a really, really terrible evening, but. Great, I think. Was
Quite good.
Quite good, okay. And no, but I sort of like, but then he came and we met in the Farmgate, and then we went to the sort of Kirkadurka's little office, and then he read these couple of scenes from me, and I thought, oh God, he's fucking really brilliant. He's a really great actor, and it was like, oh my Jesus. So when we put himself and Eileen together, it was like, dynamite. And really, we were that much older than them, and but the play really captured, I think, a time for a lot of sort of people in Cork at that time where there was sort of a lot of cross-pollination of, creative shit going on. That was really, really super, super exciting. I think we sort of, we were just a part of that, really. And I think the play speaks of that sort of energy and just how sort of ephemeral sort of like energy and creation is, that these characters create this language and then it goes. And that is a real sort of like a super, super tragic thing. It's a death of something, but also it's a death of youth and all of that sort of business. So that was worth chasing down, I think. I think that's what we got. Yeah.
And these two amazing kind of chaotic teenagers, like to be, put in front of you in written form. What I'm really curious about is how much it then changed, when you got the three of you got in the room. Like I've heard you recently say on radio that you're a really good collaborator. So I'd love to ask Killian, what does that mean? Is that true? Is he a really good collaborator? What does he mean by that?
Are you talking specifically about Disco Pigs or in general?
Well, starting with Disco Pigs. And
we did that workshop, right?
Yeah, we workshopped it. And again, like I was so green and so naive, I didn't really have a clue, but I just loved everybody. Like I loved Eileen and Enda and Pat. And it really felt like, because I just had this band that didn't work out, and then it felt like kind of being in a band again, and we were going out, and the play toured everywhere. It was kind of magic, it was kind of like, being young and not knowing any better. And we came to Dublin to the Theatre Festival, Fringe, and it won the Fringe, and it won Best Play at the Fringe. And we went to Edinburgh, and it won awards there. So, it was a massive collaboration. But the real collaboration, I think, began later in the later plays. I think, you know.
So moving on then to Mr. Man, which I think was the second play you worked on together. Was that a very different experience for you both? Because you played the part yourself, hadn't you, originally?
Yeah, I did. I ended up in hospital afterwards. It nearly killed me. It's sort of like I had a seizure in Cork, sort of on the street in Cork. That's when I realized, oh, I'm not an actor, because I really took it on, and it's a hard part to play, but like it nearly killed me. I mean, I did perform it for a while, and then I was meant to go to, anyway, let's not go down that road. It was hard. But yeah, so I initially did it. So it was always, to me, you know, it was booked in already the Traverse, and the Traverse had sold out already to see Enda Walsh's second play coming to the Traverse. And I was in hospital at the time, you know, going, oh, geez, I'm really sorry, everyone. And then, you know, so to me, it was always like a failure of the play. And, you know, like, and it was the play after Disco Pigs. And I went the other way. It was like a country sort of play. I'm a Dubliner really, but it was it was set in the sort of like Midlands. And at the time, Ballykissangel was on, and I was like going, yeah, I'm going to take a fucking hammer to Ballykissangel, whatever the fuck that meant. And I ended up doing this sort of twisted, sort of dark thing, la 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 la, and you know, but set in the countryside. And and anyway, so when I did it and when it didn't work out, it was that. So Killian, you know, after Disco Pigs went off and sort of started making movies and did other theatre and stuff like that. But it was Killian who came to me, right? You came to me.
I hadn't done theatre in a long time. There was a period, and I hadn't read anything that I really liked in theatre, but I was very anxious to get back to do it. And then I saw the Walworth farce in the National Theatre, and it was the most kind of electrifying night I've ever had in a theatre, just watching something. It just blew my windows out. It was just phenomenal. And then I was thinking about it, and I thought, why don't I just work with Enda again? It doesn't make any sense that we haven't worked together since Disco Pigs. And I knew that the play hadn't been performed. You'd kind of put it away. Yeah. And I remember you first...
It hurt.
But you said no when I asked you to do it. Yeah. And then I had to persuade you. But then he went away and he rewrote it.
I rewrote it,
yeah. So did you...
You did the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. No, I did have to sort of, and thank you for that, I forgot about that. But I did have to sort of reframe it and look at it and stuff like that, because to go back in with exactly the same script just felt like it was actually, I think that would have been really, really super hard for me. But I found a way in to sort of reframe it, and we must have talked about that, I imagine. I mean, it seems so long ago, but like in our discussions with it. But then we had a document, and then it was right that we went back in. But, you know, we remained friends from Disco Pigs. It was just, you know, like... But when Killian sort of nudged me and went this, and then Anne Clark and Paul Fahey were like going, well, you know, we'll do it, and da-da-da. And, you know, we both love Galway, so we were just thinking, we were like going, yeah, let's fuck it, let's make it, and we'll do it in this thing called the Black Box in Galway, and you know, like, and see how it sort of turns out. But it became really, really, in the room, it became really easy and fun. And I think we sort of refound like our friendship and our sort of like, it was always there, but like suddenly it was like magnified. You know?
Can you talk a bit about that, what happened in the room? Because I remember when I saw it in the National, Killian, I saw it in London, and I think I was saying to you earlier, it felt like there was a whole cast of people on stage. There's an incredible physicality and running around and voices and tapes. And can you talk about how you got there and what went on between the two of you in the room? Either of you.
Well, it was exhilarating, and I always find when I'm working with Enda, and it's so creative that I can't sleep, and you know, I actually go home buzzing, and I can't actually sleep because you're having all these ideas, and you come into the room, and there's no bad idea with the two of us, and with the team that Enda has kind of assembled that are amazing, and so it's constantly throwing ideas around and putting them up on their feet and seeing if they work. And at that time, I had an awful lot of like physical energy. I used to be very highly energetic. I don't know quite how to. And it was just very useful for the play because
you almost did Thomas's legs there. Sorry, that's the character.
It was kind of useful for that character. And then we brought Michael Murphy in to do some of the movement work on it, and it was just amazing. It was, and the play kept growing. We brought it to Galway, and then we brought it to the National, then we brought it to America, and it kept kind of growing and expanding. And
yeah, I think it's sort of like, and what we sort of, because I know obviously Killian before, you know, like in terms of what his energy is like, and in terms of like, you know, so you do film work, and certain people think you're a certain type of character, but like to me, you know, so to me, Killian's really, really funny. So like, and physically funny, like he can do really funny things. I like him, and both of us are sort of like Buster Keaton fans. So Buster Keaton sort of became a sort of like, you know, we would look at things and just roar laughing at that, and then sort of like just go at the work. And like a lot of it is actually trying to make each other laugh, and sort of like that. But actually, but we knew the sort of the anxiety and the sort of like the hugeness and the tragedy of this character. Sorry, anyone who doesn't know the play, it's based upon this really sort of, I won't go into it, but this thing that happened in the west of Ireland. It was really, really sort of sad. But in our story, this guy kicks a dog to death one afternoon and ends up killing a girl later on that evening. And he's now in this sort of disused sort of factory with loads of tapes, because he tapes people all the time around town, and he's playing the tapes, but he's edited in such a way so when he plays out the day, he thinks that an angel has turned up, but it's actually just a girl who's sort of playing through his eyes, playing a trick on him. And he's sort of like, he's sort of seen as the village idiot, and as Irish people, we all sort of get that. So, you know, like, the fucking, you know, but actually there's something really super, super dark going on in there. So we knew the scale of it and the size of it and what we were playing with and the lighting wise, and there were certain sort of, you know, Hitchcockian sort of like, you know, the sort of big sort of like, you know, lights that we wanted to sort of use with, and when to introduce music. So we were playing with the tropes of sort of, you know, this fucking thriller, but at the root of it was this driven by this mad energy, or this anxiety of this person trying to look at himself to say, I was right to kill that girl. Now that's a horrible, horrible thing, but of course he never gets to that. He's still broken, and it's just...
It was also a very funny play, wasn't it? I mean,
it was funny.
Like it sounds awful.
Yeah. Everything tonight is going to sound awful, but actually it's really funny.
But that's something that seems to kind of sit between you both in terms of the characters that both of you tend to focus on. They're kind of on the edges. There's an ambiguity about them. You tend to be interested in people that kind of have good and bad and have dark and light in them. Is that accurate, would you say?
Yeah, well, I, to be honest with you, I think I was spoilt with Disco Pigs with the level of writing that I encountered as a kid with no experience. And then from then on, we kind of have had the same sort of taste in story, I think. And certainly those kind of marginal characters, or like you say, ambiguous characters, or sort of shining a torch into the kind of weirder parts of this, or someone's psychology, that's very interesting to me. And we always talk about characters under immense pressure. You know, to see what pressure does to someone's psyche is very, very interesting.
And I think we like behavior, of like how characters behave, and when their behavior really sort of impacts like everything, the whole play and the structure of the play. And a big thing I think that came up for us all the time was the effect of the environment on the character. So in Mr. Man, it was about we kept on talking about like man and building. It was a guy in a disused factory trying to control it, while that factory was kicking the living shite out of him and trying to drag him to sort of truth. Now that became really sort of like big. That sounds really pretentious, but it was, but that's a big thing I think in all my plays, that it's about people trying to sort of control their environment. That we really, because it then puts a lot of pressure on the actor and on the character. Do you know what I mean? So it's like all the time of they feel a bit bullied, you know, like by where they are. And we can see that, I think, as an audience.
That's a really interesting thing in the idea of wanting to control your environment in that way.
Yeah. I mean, but that's sort of like, you know, but we all have it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, Jesus Christ. Anyway, I was praying for like, I was in Galway today, and I was so tired because I drove to fucking Kenmare from Galway. I promised I wasn't going to say this, but it was really stiff. I drove all the way from Galway to Kenmare and then back, and sort of like, and I was knackered. It was like I left at 1 in Spiddle and fucking came back at, anyway, fuck it. But I was praying for a taxi driver from Galway to sort of like, that would be really quiet. Talking about trying to control your environment, forget about it. So I got it in the ear for about until sort of Athlone, and then I passed out. And who wouldn't in Athlone, but anyway. But it's sort of like, I think having to sort of like, controlling your environment is something that we get, right, as sort of people, of like that the world is sort of like, it's sort of like it's itchy and a bit broken and not being sort of settled. Now that's a very sort of primal thing that we all sort of get. And I think, in these sort of plays, we just sort of amplify it. So an audience sort of get that, or seeing characters in a position where the characters don't know where they are, and they haven't figured out what that sort of, where they're living or anything like that is really, something that I think as people would be going, that's not a nice feeling,
Yeah. The perfect time to move to Ballyturk.
Yeah.
So you found Killian for Disco Pigs, and Killian, you brought
Mr. Man.
a Mr. Man to out. So how did the two of you end up in Ballyturk?
Well, I mentioned that we had Michael Murphy helping us on Mr. Man with the kind of physical. He's an amazing physical actor, unbelievable, and Enda really liked the energy between the two of us, and we're good. I've known Michael forever. We're good pals, and then you just wanted to write a play for us, didn't you? Wasn't that how it came about?
Yeah, but you guys pitched it like this. What about me and Michael just sort of fucking, just telling jokes to one another? I was like, okay, what's the play about? No, we're just telling fucking jokes for an hour and a half. And I
still think it's a good idea for a play.
Well, it was as fucking... But it was, your energy was just, both of you together was hilarious. And I was like going, oh my God. It was sort of like, but it came about because we were in New York at the time and doing Mr. Man. Do you remember this? We were in New York doing Mr. Man, and Killian was like by the table in Mr. Man. And there was something wrong with the table's leg. And Killian was in the middle of a scene, just going at a scene, talking to Mammy. His Mammy was on this tape recorder, talking to his Mammy about a cat or whatever. And he was acting, and the stage, our production manager, Eamon, was fixing the leg of the chair. So he was just like that. So his energy was that. And Killian was in the middle of this fucking thing, talking like this. And I was going, oh my God, look at that. I said, how two people can be sort of right beside one another and have completely different energies and different universes. And I thought, oh, maybe that's what the play of people telling fucking jokes should be about. People who are right on top of one another, but are really, really, and relying on one another and need one another and have this sort of like really deep love affair, sort of brotherly love affair, but actually are just... couldn't be any different, There's a bit of that.
Killian, there's a sequence in the middle of that, and it's funny, I was at a conference recently in America, and somebody was talking about that sequence and trying to figure out was it written, was it discovered, because it's so perfectly timed, the sequence to the living on the ceiling, the night, is it? So I'm really curious. But it's so specifically timed, isn't it? Like it needs to be perfectly timed to get into the shower, to get out of the shower, over and back.
That was ABC.
ABC, sorry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that was timed within an inch of itself.
So was that written? Was that discovered? How did that come about?
I can't recall. Certainly, all the songs were picked for sure. And I feel a little bit nauseous anytime they come on the radio and those songs. It just reminds me. But they were all picked, weren't they? And then I think you'd written, during this time, they do X, Y, and Z.
But do you remember that workshop that we had in the tricycle upstairs? This is way before, or was it in the National Theatre? Where we just came together and I played a track and we had a load of fucking clothes on the floor. Oh, yeah. And I said to Michael, and you just dress one another and see what happens.
Yeah.
Was there something like that?
That's right. That's right. But they were rehearsed, and Michael is so brilliant at that stuff, and we just did it, the three of us together, and over and over and over and over again. But it was very, very precise, physical stuff.
We wanted it. So it was weird. We want, like, particularly the first. It's in 3 acts, and the first act needed to be sort of like directed within an inch of itself. There was a lot of choreography, but then when it came to rehearsing the last act, I don't think we ever rehearsed it, really. It was just pure rawness.
It was insanely fast, though. It was unbelievable it was frantic, wasn't it, from what I remember?
One of my favourite stories about Ballyturk was, if any of you have seen it, at the end, I take all these 45s and smash them upstage against the wall. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it was terrible health and safety, but we were fucking real 45s up against the wall. They were smashing and flying into the audience. Anyway, but it was like, hundreds of them up against, remember?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was highly dangerous. But like, at one point, one of the 45s, anyway, went up and flew into the audience. And then we got a letter in the next day from this woman to say that she loved that song and she'd always wanted a copy in 45. And it like whoop, arrived in her lap. Yeah, there was many stories like that from that.
But do you know what? There's sort of, I mean, Ballyturk became like so fucking slapstick, but only on the basis that like when we were doing Mr. Man, Cillian had this whole this whole sort of routine at the very beginning of Mr. Man with an egg, where he tries to make scrambled eggs, and he's like, and the character talks like this, and behind him he starts fucking these scrambled eggs all over the place, and we used to roar laughing because the eggs used to just go everywhere against this wall and he'd smash things. Cillian can smash anything, so anyone who's sort of stage manager goes, oh fuck, you know, because he's just not. And so I thought, oh, we should so with Ballyturk we really sort of upped it, because it's sort of like, you know, when we did Mr. Man and he was running around in these little sandals with his socks on, running around, we put all this shit on the ground, so it looked like really dangerous. Yeah. And Cillian's like running the length of the Littleton Theatre with a hammer, sort of like, and Doris Day is playing on the thing, and he comes up and he jumps over this thing. And I mean, it was really athletic, but it also looked incredibly dangerous. And I think that anxiety where the audience are going, oh fuck, that looks really, really, that he's going to, we really upped that for Ballyturk. Because I think it's sort of like the liveness of that is and it's funny, first of all, it's funny, but the danger of it just, I think the audience get really sort of hooked, like they get lost in it, so they get super, super giddy, but also scared. And that's really fantastic, to feel that in the house. Yeah. And then everyone's really excited that they're fucking shitting themselves and also laughing at the same time. and it's ABC, and it's really, really, really high. So I think, but that energy came from Cillian first throwing the egg. I think, you know, that slapstick sort of nature of it.
Can you talk a little bit about that character, Cillian? Because I'm really curious. Like, I've heard you talk about the kind of research you do for some of your screen work and the amount of research you do, and I'm just curious if you get an end to play, and the character's so abstract, there's no, you know, what do you hang on to in order to find him? And can you just talk a little bit, because some people might know what that story, but it's got quite an impactful ending, shall we say?
Yeah. Well, with theatre, I don't really tend to do like the research is the rehearsal really, and the workshops before, and that's my favorite thing about theatre is the rehearsal. It actually is my favorite. I prefer it more than actually doing the play. Like, I love being in the rehearsal room, and that's that time where I get so over. It's actually only with Enda's plays like that. I get so kind of fizzing, you know, that I can't sleep and everything, because it's so unbelievably creative. And for that particular play, it was just the dynamic between me and Michael, and then obviously Stephen Ray in the third act. But there was no research as such as in the traditional way of like reading books or talking about. And it was really a kind of a love story, this kind of platonic love story between these two characters, and then this unbelievable third act that nobody expected. I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does actually. But that physicality though, and that tension between that kind of high energy action and movement and the language is really kind of specific to your work, Enda. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you've come to that, or has that come through your collaborators like Cillian, because you do choose such energetic collaborators or performers?
Yeah. It's sort of like, I mean, it comes from the fact that I think I'm hugely inarticulate, and it takes me 1,000, you know, words to sort of like to say what I mean, which is really, really annoying for an audience. But like, it's sort of like, you know, but to get to the point. But but it becomes about the journey, why it's difficult for me to sort of get there, or the characters are getting there. So the characters tend to be sort of broken and sort of inarticulate and not and lost and all that type of thing. And their behavior is really, it's difficult to unlock, but we begin to learn the language and we begin to sort of learn why they are the way they are and whether they're okay with that or whether, you know, they're trying to change it in a certain way. Now that's like what I feel every day of the week for my whole life, you know, like, and I think it's sort of like, as a playwright, you really get to sort of pour that into sort of characters. Now, to me, you know, I mean, I understand that they do sort of like, to many people, they might feel like sort of abstract, but I really think I'm the least sort of abstract person in this room at the moment. You know, like, I think it's very sort of truthful. And it's sort of like, and any sort of research that needs to be done, I think comes from the dialogue that we have in the rehearsal room, just in terms of the pressure it is to get up in the morning and to live a life, you know, like, and get on with it. And, you know, the plays tend to be sort of like also routine based. We all know what that is. And, you know, like, and the impact the environment has on that person or the routine has on your own self and sense of freedom or wanting to sort of break away from that. So at the sort of root of them, they're very sort of simple, and they speak about what we all feel sort of every day. But they come at you in this sort of like anxiety-ridden sort of like physicality, because I'm like that, you know, like, and also I'm sort of attracted to sort of actors who are also like that, you know, like who are able to do like really extreme things with their bodies. And also when I look at them as characters on stage, that mix of like exhausting them, that sense of danger that they're going to fucking fall apart, that thing about being ridiculously inarticulate and they'll never actually find sort of happiness, that's enough for me to actually stay with them all the time, because I'm willing them to sort of find a way, do you know, through it.
And I think it also lends itself to like amazing theatricality in the work, which I really like. It's very satisfying for the audience, I hope, because it kind of expands and contracts. You know, I have these big kind of numbers, and like, and is even moving into this kind of audio-visual world now, which is really, really impressive. But then, then it contracts right down to like the tiniest of movements and just a pure language, and then this hugely theatrical episode. And I find that very satisfying as an audience member. You know?
Yeah, it's exactly that. We've always thought about that. We've always thought about, like, you know, when we're doing the work, it's about like throwing shit into the air, throwing noise and action and sort of like wildness, but only sort of like so that we can get to sort of moments of stillness and really feel them, you know, like so it's constantly, you know, this sounds so pretentious, but I did say to the team at one stage, you know, that, you know, what we're doing is just, you know, we're doing sort of weather patterns, we're doing atmosphere and rhythm and all of that, and we're chucking that around inside the theatre. You know, it might feel as if, you know, it's not at times understandable in that sort of ABC way, but you get it in the gut. You understand the strain of it, and that's sometimes enough. That's the thing about fucking theatre, is that like the literal stuff around words are really, really difficult, because a word means what a word means, right? So as a playwright, you're constantly, but I have to use words, but you're constantly putting them in a shape, or in a sort of like in a fucking sequence, or in a sort of structure in a play, to get away from the words, really, to try and sort of make them less literal, to make the world a less sort of literal thing. That it bypasses that, the sort of the head, and it goes sort of to somewhere that feels like human, and, you know, like, and of the sort of stomach and all that type of thing. It sounds so pretentious.
Not at all.
But I really mean it, and I do mean it. I do sort of like, it is sort of like, you know, so maybe it isn't pretentious, maybe it's my truth, which is a pretentious thing to say.
I don't think it's pretentious at all, actually, because I think that's what we're striving for, isn't it? With theatre, with any art form, to hit an audience or communicate something in a way that's not intellectualized or doesn't hit you in the brain. It hits you somewhere else. It has.
I think when you're making that work with it, but I think when you're making that work with an actor, and sort of like, and Killian's like a stage animal, and sort of like who understands that sort of, you know, like, is not just sort of like, you know, a conduit for sort of all these ideas. There's enough, you know, personality and sort of humanity in him as a person, I hope you don't mind me saying that, that actually that sort of like comes out in a really, really truthful way.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, maybe, Killian, about how your screen then and stage work inform each other? Because to take something that's such a physical, I suppose, thing for you, like theatre, and the way that you approach it, and it's almost non-intellectual, and then to go into something like, whether it's Selby in Peaky Blinders or the Oppenheimer, or some, a real character where you have to inform yourself about who this person is. Is there things that you can take from the way that you work in the room with Enda into that process and vice versa, or are they very different things for you?
No, they're very related. We've often talked about, screen acting generally is in the close-up generally, and theatre by its nature is always the wide shot. Like it's always the wide shot, and it never cuts in. So you get to act with your body, and I love doing the full acting with your body. It's amazing and very satisfying. But the process is the same. I like that distinction between intellectual process and an emotional one. I always think the emotional one is where you end up, no matter what, or where you should end up. Now, you can research, and you absorb some of it, but when you get on the floor, whether it be in film or in theatre, that all disappears, and it has to be the truth between you and the performer next to you, or however many performers, and that's what it's about, and it's only in the moment. So all of your reading and studying and all of that kind of disappears, and it can be useful, and it can make you feel secure as you approach a role, but ultimately it's just that moment there that you're looking for. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, good, totally. Yeah, I can imagine. And so I've heard you say something in an interview, like, I think it was in Peaky Blinders, you were saying, you shot certain shots, kind of very long shots, 20 minutes, didn't cut in, and kind of use that kind of, I suppose, full character that you can use in theatre in that way. Would you consciously do that once you start? Do you know what I mean? Would you consciously be involved in making choices like that for scenes that you're in on screen?
Well, this is kind of a technical thing, but sometimes, and most times in a film, it's like your coverage, and so you're never really in the scene together. The camera's on you. But in some of those scenes in Peaky Blinders, particularly the scenes with Tom Hardy, we would cross-shoot them, so it felt like a piece of theatre. By cross-shooting, I mean that there's two cameras shooting at the same time, so it gives you total. It's not like your take, but you might take it, and that's so exhilarating, because it does feel like a piece of live theatre. It's much more tense than so you don't get that often, but when you do, or you can sometimes manufacture it so that it feels more real, more live than otherwise.
And would you get a chance to choose that? I'm just thinking, because I remember in Hunger, I know you didn't work on that together, but you had a big long sorry, oops.
I think it was offered to you, actually.
But you had a big long shot in the middle of that too, like an extraordinary scene. And did you write that in like that, or is that something, I'm just curious in terms of how you make that decision and why that's useful in terms of the storytelling and in terms of a character, and giving a character that amount of time and space on screen seems unusual.
Well, just on that sort of specific point, I think it's sort of like, drama to me, and it's all like a sort of a denial of information, or a denial of sort of impulse or emotion, and then when to actually sort of give that emotion or that information or whatever it is. So with Hunger, we just took that to extreme. So we just made it silent for the first half an hour, and then when the characters did talk, they talked non-stop for sort of like 20 minutes, and then we stopped that, and then we created a different sort of film language after that. So that was a very sort of simple, do you know what I mean? It's sort of very sort of like, so yeah, it was at a point in the film where I thought these characters need to talk. So if they're going to talk, they're going to talk non-stop for sort of like 20 minutes in the way. But it was my experience of sort of meeting with sort of people who'd gone through the hunger strikes, or, were members of the IRA, is that when you meet them, sort of like you sit down with them, and they're incredibly sort of like, nice people, sort of like, and, chatty people, and then you sit down with them, and then they focus, and it's a different sort of language, and a very serious, huge, historical sort of like, the weight of just sort of pours out. And anyway, so that sort of, those sort of experiences affected that thing, but yeah, that was always there in that piece, yeah.
so grief is a thing like feathers. Was it a slightly different thing? Is it you adapted someone else's work, and so how did you come to that together? I mean, do you want to talk about that?
You, was it? Was it
Killian?
you or me?
It was you.
Was it me?
Yeah. No,
Oh,
I think it was
fuck.
Max came to you, didn't he?
Oh yeah. Theatre de Complicité in oh yeah, that's where it was. So Theatre de Complicité came to me, and they said, we have this book, Grief is the Thing with Feathers, by Max Porter. Would you read it, like to adapt it? And I went, they're a fantastic company, and I thought, they were like, of my generation, they really sort of affected, my generation of theatre makers, la 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 la. So I thought, wow, great, okay. So read it, and I thought, this is extraordinary. And then I sent it to Killian, and I straight away I sort of found. I think did I say, oh, if we do it, it's about a father who's his wife of 2 little sons, and his wife has just died, and he's going through this whole sort of like this grief, and a crow arrives, and the crow bullies the shit out of him, and sort of in an extraordinary way sort of helps him through his grief, but it's very sort of strange and sort of abstract, like sort of grief is. Sort of you have to sort of walk through that storm, of like sadness and all of that to find some sort of clarity, and it's like it's completely broken and strange and all that sort of business. But did I come with the idea that you should play Crow and Dad, or did that?
Yeah. I
That's
think
brilliant.
I do have some ideas as well. But.
Yeah. That was the best one, I think. That was.
Yeah, you did, and that was the kind of appeal of it. I loved the book, and like when Enda said, okay, well, you could play the Crow and the Dad. It was you couldn't say no to that, and then it was a beautiful adaptation because it was just the book. There was no additional line. It was just the book, but we just staged it.
Yeah, and I think we did that together, in fairness. We looked at the book, and you were going, and I made some sort of structural things. I said, maybe this, and then you were reading, going, well, what about this? So we actually ended up doing the adaptation, I felt, together, in terms of like deciding when scenes should happen. And then we had it before. We might have made some changes in the rehearsal. But the big thing, again, was actually just putting pressure on one person. Yeah. God love him. But it was sort of like, but it was a good idea, this notion that, like that it's sort of like that actually this demon, this pathogen, this thing was was inside him, and it would go eventually. But it was both sort of kicking the shit out of him, but also like, helping him. But it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah, it was very kind of.
It was hard.
Just dealing with that on stage every night, the idea of grief and loss, and it was tough. Yeah, I mean, we had a laugh as well, but doing it, like performing it every night, took a kind of toll on me.
And having he's got 2 little boys and stuff like that, and it's sort of like I think initially it was sort of like we were both attracted to that, I guess. But then you open that up, and then you go in there every day to do that work, and it wasn't sort of like until I sort of was watching it in performance that I went, oh God, this must be taking a lot out of Killian. This is really sort of like, this is battering. And it's hard it was a really, really hard text. It was his fucking decision to sort of, to crouch up on a fucking bunk bed with his sort of, which was fucking amazing looking, but I went, his body is gonna be absolutely wrecked. But like, it was incredibly truthful, sort of, it was, what I loved about the piece, and I love about sort of Max's writing and stuff like that, and particularly the third act of that play, it was we passed so much through Killian, like emotion and physicality and brokenness, and sort of he did this crazy thing with his voice that we passed all that sort of through him, and then but we had to earn the last act, which is basically just him standing there and telling it really, really simply, and there's no lighting, and it's just him and his boys sort of, finally take him out of his dressing gown and dress him in a shirt and a pair of trousers, and he's gone through the thing. We've sort of, we did it sort of like I say with sort of Ballyturk. It's like it's really weird. It's like I find directing the last 10 minutes of a play really, really hard, and I feel as if, well, if I've got the hour and 20 right, then the 10 minutes shouldn't need directing. You know what I mean? And we shouldn't touch them. We really felt like that with that.
But that was with Mr. Man. I think the first time we ever performed it, we had never fully rehearsed the ending. We put it up live, remember?
Oh yeah, because we were terrified.
Yeah, and we just
Yeah.
and it just happened, and then every night the ending just kept kind of morphing and growing and evolving every
That's
time.
right, because you had that crazy speech. That
Yeah,
sort of
then
like,
and it used to never be the same. Remember, the lines would just move around.
yeah,
and-
you would move around it.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. I think it's sort of like, and I think an audience get that. There's something about like, you know, that with the show's sort of like, the showing off is done. This is the truth. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, this is it. This is why we're here, sort of like thing. And, you know, and with that piece, that was really, 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 but it was also incredibly powerfully written. And, you know, like, I wasn't going to throw my fucking words on his words. It was like going, they are perfect. We just needed it, and Cillian just earned it so much to stand there and just sort of say it so simply, and then finally hear these two boys talk, you know, like, and begin these new voices on the stage who were silent throughout it, which is really cool and emotional. I'm so sorry it was just so fucking hard. I was like, because you ended up doing so many performances of it. I remember in New York at the end of it, we were sitting in that fucking dive bar afterwards, and you just looked like a broken man.
Yeah, I think
Trying to get drunk on whiskey going, God, this is hard.
I think I may have been just a little bit too old for that play. It was because I was leaping around the place and everything. And I remember
Yeah,
I would
but,
just...
but I don't think emotionally, I don't think there was something about the way you went at that I don't think you would be able to have performed that 10 years previously,
Probably, yeah.
because you had the boys and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And
yeah. It was so exhilarating, but it was really, I don't know. It was hard, yeah. Just the subject matter and the whole thing. But it was great.
yeah, it was great.
I hate to be a whingy actor, you know. It was so hard.
You got a job, didn't you? Fucking hell, kept you fucking busy.
Do you know what, though? Do you know what, though, Cillian? I think it's really important, actually, to say that, because I have so many conversations that kind of verge on acting as line learning, and I find it incredibly frustrating, and I can only imagine as an actor, because I think it's really important, because that's why we're here, that's why we're having these conversations. It's why theatre's so important, it's why story's so important. It's what you as a performer are prepared to give away so that we can understand something about ourselves. And the more you give away of yourself in a way, the more we understand.
Totally. I completely agree. Yeah. And what we've always talked about as well is that it's so fucking fragile, theatre. It might at any point collapse or go wrong. And it's so dangerous as well. What you're doing, what all the actors are doing, what everyone is engaging in, it's insane, you know?
Yeah,
Trying
you're reliant on the will of the audience to imagine.
Yeah.
And that's great, but you have to you have to play with that and give them stuff, and also and you know, when it's a live thing, feel that sort of energy between you. But also that thing that we have, yeah, that thing that we all know that it's so fragile, it's so vulnerable, and it can sort of fall apart. I think it's watching the effort of it being done, and the effort of turning up, of and fucking driving in and hopping on the tube or whatever it is, or getting the bus in or whatever, and I'm watching, parking the car and and sitting there and going, for what? You know, like, what's all this about? You know, but you turn up because you figure that actually you might get something out of the exchange that will sort of, I don't know. It's not sort of about changing you. It's about sort of like, well, sometimes theatre sort of can do, but it's more, I think, actually just about the fact that we're doing it, that it's the effort of it. And that seems like a really valuable thing to do.
I think so. I'll just tell you this, like, I keep quoting this because it was just the most reassuring thing that happened. We had some transition year students in here a couple of months ago, and I've been saying this everywhere because it was such a relief. But there was this young girl, and I asked her, you know, now that you're all online and that, you know, you've such short attention spans and things are moving so fast in the world, do you really think theatre is important? And this girl said, yeah, it's really important to me because it's the only place I can go to see things in the world without having to live through them.
Wow.
And it's the most most important kind of sentence that it keeps me going, yeah, it's absolutely essential to be here, because that's the point of the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah. I'm going to open it up to the audience in a minute, but I have to just ask you, in terms of these extreme characters, Killian, and what you go through, and now we're about to sort of see Oppenheimer, and what you've gone through, like sharing that kind of character with us, a person who's responsible potentially for the atomic bomb, somebody who worked on the Manhattan Project. How do you do that? Where do you start with something like that? Can you tell us a little bit? Because you also have a really close collaboration with Christopher Nolan, who directed it. So one of the things I've loved watching here is seeing how you two kind of, the edges bleed, and you kind of, you're not sure whose idea what was, and there's a real sense of trust between you. And I assume because you keep going back to work with Christopher Nolan, you must have some similar relationship with him. Would that be?
I think you put your finger on it though, with trust. That's the big thing. Trust, and trust is very adjacent to friendship, isn't it? And they're the kind of the same thing. And then there's the shorthand, and same taste is very important. I love collaboration, re-collaboration. I think it's the most satisfying thing to come back into a room or onto a film set with someone you know and trust, because you go straight to the work. There's none of the getting to know you or any of that. It's just straight into the work, and that's why I think it allows for really excellent work sometimes, because it's just kind of pure, and you've established all the things you need to establish. So I love it. And I've done it with many people, just worked several times, and I find it very rewarding, and hopefully the work gets richer.
Actually, I also didn't mention your most recent collaboration together, which is incredibly exciting. Small things like these, which I think is a departure into film. And I'm just wondering, I can't actually go to the audience without getting you to just say something about that, because what an incredible character to play. The thing that's intriguing me about it is you play a character, and you've adapted Claire's book, but this is a character that we all wish had have existed a bit more, and we wouldn't be in the state we're in. So can you, without giving too much away, because I know you're in the early stages, but can you talk a little bit about how that came about and where you started with it? Because I think you're also producing it, Killian, or co-producing it, so you're very involved in the whole project.
Yes, I adore Claire Keegan's work, and I'd read the book, and I thought this would make a great film, but I thought, the rights will be gone. They're always gone. Sometimes the rights are gone before the book's ever published. They're gone when it's a proof or whatever. But miraculously, the rights were still available. So we managed to get the rights, and I immediately knew that Enda would do an amazing job. He adores her work as well, and it kind of came together really quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It was great, and she's an incredible writer, probably one of the greatest. But yeah, it sort of read it, thought an extraordinary sort of character. You know, when we did Grief, someone stopped me in the airport and Heathrow, a man, and I was at a time, for very good reason, that men were getting it in the fucking neck, for very good reasons. And this man sort of came up to me and goes, "Are you Enda Walsh?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Oh God, I saw Grief last night. Thank you for putting a good man on stage." And I thought, wow. And I thought, "Oh yeah, cheers, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's amazing." And I was like, and I thought, wow, that's an extraordinary thing. It was anyway. And so when I read that book, there was a bit of that. I was like going, God, Claire, she writes men also just so beautifully. I mean, like all characters. I think she understands people. Some people just write it. Some writers just write about people, and they get away with being writers. But I really, really think she fucking gets people in an extreme sort of way, really incredibly truthful way. And I just wanted to go at it because I thought, well, I love her, and the tone of the book is so beautiful, and it's the sort of film that I like. My plays might be sort of maximalist, you know, like in sort of in throw, but they're always reaching for sort of like some sort of quietness. But my taste in film is to make a film quite sort of like small and beautiful, and to be in that world of just sort of adapting this thing. I was like, man. I mean, and also I needed that. I think I was going to give up writing. I was like, I just had such a weird sort of like coming through the pandemic, and then I did a load of work, and then I was knackered. But I figured, oh God, I've had 12 years of working my whole off, and I was actually just burnt out. And this adaptation really sort of, it did two things. It helped me sort of through that period. But also, I've been burnt so many times by film, you know, that it was such a joy to do and to work on it and to feel really sort of like, you know, well, anyway, it's just a really, really, and he produced it. I mean, he's acted it so well, but he produced it so brilliantly, you know, like, it was just, and as Cillian says, when you know someone and you get the right people together, which is a skill, you know, as a producer, you know, to get the right people together and everyone's pointed in the right direction, then it's just about sort of, you know, allowing people to sort of do the good work and always ask the right questions, which is, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Cillian, which sort of even in the room, he doesn't like anything to be sort of general. When things get sort of general, he'll always sort of ask the question, which a lot of people don't ask the question, and then it gets not said. And sometimes you make something, you go, fuck, we should have asked that question. But he'll always ask the question, which is really, really fantastic. And I think when you have a mixture of sort of that sort of application of sort of like focus, and also be really great with people. That's great. So it was like a real joy. Thank you for that.
Thanks, man.
Can you talk a little bit about your sort of coming to that and leading that whole project in that way?
It's weird because it goes back to re-collaboration again, because I co-produced it with Alan Maloney, who I've made like 5 films with, and then the director is Tim Mealans, who I worked with on Peaky Blinders. So it's all people, and a lot of the crew, and a lot of the Eileen Walsh plays Eileen in the book, plays my wife, and so it was getting a lot of people who I love and adore to work together again on that, because we all felt a great affection and kind of responsibility for the book because it's so magnificent. So it was a really lovely time. We shot it in New Ross in Wexford, and all the town was involved, and it was a lovely experience. So now, hopefully the film fucking lives up to that.
Yeah, no pressure.
Then I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much, Cillian and Enda. Thank you all for being here.